The morning light filtered through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the faded linoleum floor. I sat at the small oak table, the one Frank and I had purchased 30 years ago when we first moved into this house. The foreclosure notice lay before me, its official letterhead and legal terminology attempting to disguise a simple truth. I had 3 months before I would lose my home. I lifted my coffee mug to my lips and took a small sip. The coffee had gone cold, much like the feeling in my chest. Frank had been gone for nearly 18 months now. The medical bills had drained what little savings we had managed to put aside, and his insurance policy had barely covered the funeral expenses. Now, at 62 years old, I found myself alone in a house too full of memories and too empty of life. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the background, marking time in a life that had become routine and colorless. I worked part-time at the local library, but the modest income was not enough to cover the mortgage payments that had fallen behind. My daughter Emma lived 3 hours away with her own family, and I had no intention of becoming a burden to her. I pushed back from the table and wandered into the living room. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that slanted through the partially closed blinds. The house needed cleaning, but I could not find the motivation. Instead, I found myself climbing the narrow stairs to the attic, drawn by some inexplicable impulse to connect with the past. The attic air was stale and warm. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, each containing carefully preserved fragments of a life fully lived. My fingers trailed across their labeled surfaces: Christmas decorations, Emma's school projects, Frank's military service. My hand paused at a box simply marked before. I knelt on the worn floorboards and lifted the lid. Inside lay the remnants of a life I had almost forgotten. Trophies with my maiden name engraved on small gold plates. Competition medals hanging from faded ribbons. And beneath it all, a hard-sided case covered in travel stickers from across the country and around the world. My heart quickened as I lifted the case and placed it across my knees. The latches opened with a familiar click. Inside, nestled in customized foam padding, lay my competition pistol. A Walther GSB.22, the same model I had used to set 3 state records and qualify for Olympic trials in my 20s. Before marriage, before motherhood, before I had packed it away for what I had thought would be forever. I lifted the pistol, surprised by how naturally my hand still curved around the grip. The weight of it felt both foreign and achingly familiar. My finger rested beside the trigger guard, never crossing it, just as I had been taught decades ago. Some lessons, it seemed, were permanent. From downstairs, the telephone rang, breaking the spell. I carefully replaced the pistol in its case and descended to answer the call. It was Mrs. Peterson from the bank, calling to discuss options for my financial situation. As she spoke in practiced tones of professional sympathy, my eyes drifted to the window. In the distance, I could see the hills where the old shooting range had been located. The range had changed hands recently, according to the local newspaper. What had once been a community facility had been purchased by a technology mogul from the city and transformed into an exclusive club. The prices had skyrocketed, placing it well beyond the reach of most locals. I had not thought much about it until this moment. After ending the call with vague promises to consider refinancing options, I returned to the attic and retrieved the pistol case. As I held it in my hands, a feeling stirred within me. Not nostalgia, but something more substantial. Purpose. Perhaps it was time to reconnect with the woman I had been before life had intervened. The woman who had once been known for her steady hand and unshakable focus. Tomorrow, I decided, I would visit the range. The next morning, I drove slowly along the winding country road that led to the Oak Ridge shooting range. The old familiar route was the same, but the destination had transformed completely. Where once stood a modest facility with weathered wooden structures and gravel parking, now rose a modernistic complex of glass and steel. The sign at the entrance no longer read Oak Ridge Community Range, but Apex Precision Club members only. I hesitated at the entrance, my aged Honda Civic looking conspicuously out of place among the luxury vehicles that filled the parking area. Sleek sports cars and high-end SUVs gleamed in the morning sunlight, their polished surfaces reflecting wealth and privilege. For a moment, I considered turning back, but the weight of the pistol case on the passenger seat reminded me why I had come. The interior of the facility was even more impressive than its exterior. The reception area featured marble flooring, leather seating, and a wall of glass that overlooked the shooting ranges beyond. A young woman with a perfect smile sat behind a reception desk that appeared to be carved from a single piece of dark wood. "Welcome to Apex Precision Club," she said, her gaze flickering briefly to my casual clothing and then back to her computer screen. "Do you have an appointment with one of our instructors?" I placed my pistol case on the counter. No, I was hopping to rent a lane for some practice. I used to shoot here years ago when it was Oak Ridge. The receptionist offered a practice smile. "I see. Well, our day passes for non-members are $500, which includes access to the standard ranges. The precision ranges are reserved for members and special events." The price was staggering. In the old days, range time had cost $20 for an entire afternoon. I hesitated, calculating mentally if I could justify such an expense given my financial situation. Before I could respond, the glass doors behind me opened, and a group of men entered, their voices loud and confident. They were dressed in what appeared to be designer shooting attire, their equipment cases bearing luxury brand logos. The receptionist immediately straightened, her demeanor shifting to one of eager deference. "Mr. Price, good morning. Your group is expected. The VIP range has been prepared according to your specifications." A tall man with silver-streaked hair nodded without really acknowledging her. He turned to his companions, continuing their conversation. "The purse for the championship round is set at $250,000. Entry is by invitation only, of course. We do not want the competition diluted by inappropriate participants." The men moved past the reception desk toward a door marked VIP Access, their conversation continuing. I caught fragments about the upcoming competition, its exclusive nature, and the high-profile competitors already committed to attending. My attention was drawn to the promotional materials displayed near the reception desk. A glossy brochure featured images of the facility and details about membership levels. Among the listed benefits for Platinum members was priority entry into the annual Apex Precision Championship. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist. "This competition they were discussing, when is it happening?" She glanced toward the VIP door before answering. "The Apex Invitational is our premier event, scheduled for 6 weeks from now. It is quite exclusive, for members and invited guests only." Something stirred within me. Not just curiosity, but a flicker of the competitive spirit that had once defined my life. Before I could reconsider, I found myself walking toward the VIP door through which the men had disappeared. The VIP range was spectacular. Climate-controlled shooting lanes extended into the distance, with electronic target systems and sophisticated lighting. The group of men stood in a cluster near the center lane, examining what appeared to be custom equipment. I approached them, my heart pounding but my step steady. "Excuse me, I could not help overhearing about your competition. I would like to inquire about entering." The conversation ceased abruptly. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me with expressions ranging from surprise to amusement. The silver-haired man who had been addressed as Mr. Price looked me over with undisguised skepticism. "You wish to enter the Apex Invitational?" he asked, his tone making it clear how absurd he found the notion. I nodded, maintaining eye contact despite my discomfort. Yes, I was quite accomplished in competition shooting in my younger days. There was a moment of silence before one of the men snickered. Another leaned in and stage whispered, "This is not a senior center event, ma'am. Perhaps you misunderstood." Mr. Price's smile did not reach his eyes. The Apex Invitational is for serious competitors only, professional and semi-professional marksmen with documented precision scores. "I understand," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I was a state champion and Olympic qualifier." This statement was met with open laughter from several of the men. The tallest of the group, a man with an expensive watch and a custom shooting jacket, gestured toward my worn attire and aged pistol case. "No offense, but that was clearly a very long time ago. This competition requires modern equipment and current skills. The entry fee alone is $10,000. The amount was deliberately mentioned to discourage me, and it worked. There was no way I could afford such a sum. The humiliation burned in my chest, but something else ignited alongside it, a determination I had not felt in decades. Mr. Price stepped forward, his manner patronizing. "Perhaps you would be more comfortable at one of the public ranges in the next county. They offer senior discounts, I believe." More laughter followed this comment. I stood there, clutching my case, aware of every line on my face, every gray hair, every sign of age that made these men dismiss me without a second thought. "Thank you for your time," I said finally, turning to leave with as much dignity as I could muster. Behind me, I heard one of them remark, "Can you imagine her competing against Maxwell? It would be like watching my grandmother try to run a marathon." The words followed me out of the building, stinging like slaps. In the privacy of my car, I allowed the tears of humiliation to fall briefly before wiping them away with determined fingers. The encounter had awakened something within me that had been dormant for too long. Back in my empty house, the silence seemed heavier than before. I placed the pistol case on the coffee table and sank into the worn armchair that had been Frank's favorite. The laughter of those men echoed in my mind, mingling with doubts about my own capabilities. Who was I trying to fool? A 62-year-old widow with outdated equipment and decades of inactivity could not seriously consider entering a professional competition. I opened the case and looked at the pistol inside. The Walther had been top of the line when Frank had given it to me as an engagement present. He had saved for months to afford it, believing in my talent long before I had fully recognized it myself. Now it was a relic, just like my dreams of competitive glory. The house creaked and settled around me as evening approached. I had not bothered to turn on the lights, preferring the gathering dimness that matched my mood. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows in a gentle rhythm that ordinarily would have been soothing. Tonight, it only emphasized my isolation. I closed the pistol case with a decisive click. This had been a foolish, nostalgic impulse, nothing more. I would return the case to the attic tomorrow and focus on practical matters, finding additional work, perhaps negotiating with the bank again. The past was best left undisturbed. The doorbell chimed, startling me from my thoughts. I opened the front door to find Emma standing on the porch, her raincoat glistening with moisture. "Mom, I have been calling for hours," she said, stepping inside and shaking water from her umbrella. "Is your phone not working?" I realized I had left my cell phone in the car after returning from the range. "I am sorry, dear. I have been distracted today." Emma's gaze sharpened as she took in my expression. My daughter had always been perceptive, a trait that made her excellent at her job as a psychologist, but occasionally inconvenient for a mother trying to hide her troubles. "What is wrong?" she asked, removing her coat and hanging it on the rack by the door. "And do not tell me nothing, because I can see it all over your face." We moved to the kitchen, where I busied myself making tea, telling Emma about my visit to the shooting range while the kettle heated. I tried to present it as an amusing anecdote, but my voice betrayed me when I described the mockery I had endured. "Those pretentious jerks," Emma said, her face flushing with indignation. "Who do they think they are?" "Wealthy men who own things," I replied simply, "including that range and the right to determine who belongs there." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Since when do you give up so easily? The mother I know would never let a bunch of entitled businessmen tell her what she can or cannot do." I sighed, placing a mug of tea before her. That mother was younger and had not been away from the sport for 30 years. "Be realistic, Emma." "Speaking of realistic," she said, her tone changing, "we need to talk about your financial situation. I found the foreclosure notice when I was looking for a pen earlier." I felt a flash of embarrassment. "I did not want to worry you. I will figure something out." Emma began to respond but stopped abruptly, her attention caught by the pistol case I had left on the coffee table. She walked over and opened it, examining the weapon inside with curious fingers. "Is this your competition pistol, the one from all your stories?" I nodded, joining her by the coffee table. "Yes, though those stories were probably exaggerated for your benefit." Emma set the pistol down carefully and turned toward the hallway. "Wait here," she instructed before disappearing into the spare room that had once been her bedroom. She returned moments later carrying a dusty cardboard box. "I found this last time I was helping you clean. I meant to ask you about it then, but we got distracted." Emma placed the box on the table and removed the lid. Inside were newspaper clippings, certificates, and photographs I had stored away decades ago. She lifted out a yellowed newspaper with a headline that read, "Jensen sets new state record. Olympic trials next." "You never told me you were this good," Emma said softly, scanning the article. "It says here you broke a record that had stood for 12 years. She continued pulling out items. A certificate from the National Rifle Association nomming me Female Marksman of the Year. A photograph of me on a podium receiving a gold medal. A letter of invitation to the Olympic training camp. "Mom, you were not just good, you were exceptional." I took the photograph from her, studying the confident young woman with the steady gaze and determined set of her jaw. She seemed like a stranger now, this younger version of myself who had believed nothing was beyond her reach. "That was a lifetime ago," I said quietly. Emma shook her head, gathering more clippings from the box. "No, that woman is still you. She has just been hiding for a while." The following morning, I found myself driving beyond the outskirts of town, following a narrow road that wound through pine forests. The address had been difficult to find, absent from modern GPS systems, and known only through word of mouth and fading memory. According to the gas station attendant I had asked, old Coach Miller had moved his operation out here after selling the original property nearly a decade ago. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I turned onto an unmarked driveway. At first, I thought I had made a mistake. The clearing contained only a weathered house and what appeared to be a large shed or barn. There was no sign, no indication of a business. I was about to turn around when I noticed the small detail that confirmed I was in the right place: a faded wooden target painted on the side of the mailbox. I parked beside an ancient pickup truck and made my way toward the barn structure. As I approached, I could hear the distinctive sound of controlled gunfire, the measured, deliberate shots of someone practicing precision rather than speed. The large sliding door stood partially open. I hesitated before calling out, "Hello, Coach Miller." The shooting stopped immediately. After a moment, a gruff voice responded, "Range is cold, come in." I stepped into the dimly lit interior. What had looked like a simple barn from outside was a meticulously organized shooting range, with 3 lanes extending the length of the building. Standing at the far end, lowering a competition pistol, was a man I had not seen in over 30 years but recognized instantly. Harold Miller had aged, certainly. His once dark hair was now completely white, and his tall frame had bent slightly with the years. But his eyes were the same, sharp, observant, missing nothing. Those eyes widened slightly as he registered my presence. "Sarah Jensen," he said, his tone neutral but his expression showing surprise. "I never expected to see you walk through that door again." I approached slowly, my pistol case in hand. "Hello, Coach. It has been a long time." He set his weapon down carefully on the shooting bench, making sure it was pointed downrange, before turning his full attention to me. 32 years, if my memory serves. You disappeared right after qualifying for the Olympic team." There was no accusation in his voice, but I felt the need to explain anyway. Life happened. Marriage, motherhood, responsibilities. He nodded once. "And now, what brings you here after all this time?" I placed my case on the bench and opened it, revealing my old Walther. "I found this in the attic recently. It made me think about what used to be important to me." Coach Miller looked at the pistol but did not touch it. "That is a fine piece of German engineering, but it is ancient technology now. The sport has evolved, Sarah." "I know," I admitted. "I visited the old range yesterday." His expression darkened. "That place is no longer what it was. Those tech billionaires turned it into a playground for the wealthy." "I noticed," I said dryly. "They made that quite clear when I inquired about their upcoming competition." This caught his attention. His eyes narrowed as he studied my face. "The Apex Invitational, you cannot be serious." "I was not initially," I explained. "But their dismissal was so complete, so contemptuous. It awakened something in me." Coach Miller shook his head. "Pride is not a sufficient reason to return to competition, especially at this level. These are not weekend hobbyists, Sarah. These men compete because they need to win at everything." I hesitated, then decided honesty was the only approach that would work with him. "It is not just pride. I received a foreclosure notice on my house. Frank passed away 18 months ago, and the medical bills. The prize money would solve everything." His expression softened slightly. "I am sorry about Frank. He was a good man." He paused, considering. "But entering a competition you cannot win is not the solution to your problems." "Who says I cannot win?" I challenged, surprising myself with my vehemence. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, the first since my arrival. "There speaks the Sarah Jensen I used to know." The smile faded quickly. "But 20 years is a long time to be away from the line." As if to emphasize his point, he gestured toward a digital target system at the end of his lane. "The equipment has changed. Electronic scoring, variable distance controls, wind simulation. It is a different world." "The fundamentals remain the same," I insisted. "Breath control, trigger discipline, focus." He regarded me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he lifted his pistol and offered it to me, grip first. "Show me." I took the weapon, noting immediately that it was heavier than my Walther, with an unfamiliar balance. I stepped up to the line, assuming the isosceles stance that had once been as natural as breathing. "3 shots, center mass," Coach Miller instructed, pressing a button that sent a fresh target downrange. My hands trembled slightly as I raised the pistol. I focused on my breathing, trying to recall the rhythm that had once been second nature. Inhale, exhale, halfway, hold, squeeze. The first shot fired, the recoil stronger than I remembered. I fired the second and third shots in succession, then lowered the weapon. Coach Miller pressed another button, bringing the target forward for inspection. The grouping was decent but not exceptional. All 3 shots had hit within the center ring, but they were spread further apart than would be acceptable in competition. "Not terrible," he admitted grudgingly. "Your form is still there, but your muscle memory needs work, and your hands are shaking." "I'm out of practice," I acknowledged. "You are out of shape for this specific activity," he corrected. "Shooting muscles are different from everyday muscles. They need to be conditioned specifically for the task." He took the pistol back, checking it carefully before setting it down. "The Apex Invitational is 6 weeks away. That is not much time to prepare, even for someone with your background." "Will you help me?" I asked directly. Coach Miller ran a hand through his white hair, his expression conflicted. "Even if we could get you back to competition form, which is a big if, there is still the matter of the entry fee. $10,000 last I heard." "I do not have that kind of money," I admitted. He nodded, unsurprised. "Few do. That is the point of setting it so high. It keeps out the riffraff." His use of the term was pointed, indicating his disgust with the elitist attitude. We stood in silence for a moment, the obstacle seeming insurmountable. Then Coach Miller sighed deeply. "Let me think about it. Come back tomorrow morning at 5:30. If I am not here, you will know my answer." I thanked him and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. "Sarah," he called, "if we do this, we do it my way. No shortcuts, no complaining, just like the old days." Despite everything, I felt a smile form. "Yes, Coach." The next morning, I arrived at the private range before dawn, the sky still dark above the pine trees. My headlights illuminated the gravel driveway as I pulled up, revealing Coach Miller's truck already parked beside the barn. My heart lifted at the sight. He had decided to help me. The interior of the range was brightly lit. Coach Miller stood at a workbench, methodically arranging equipment and tools. He did not look up as I entered, but I knew he was aware of my presence. "You are 3 minutes late," he said without turning. "The roads were foggy," I explained, setting down my pistol case and removing my jacket. He nodded once, accepting the explanation but making it clear that excuses would not be tolerated moving forward. "We start with the basics. Disassemble and reassemble your weapon 10 times. I will time you." For the next 2 hours, we focused on fundamentals. My fingers were stiff and clumsy at first, but with each repetition, the movements became more fluid as muscle memory slowly reawakened. By the 3rd day of training, I could field strip my Walther blindfolded, a skill Coach Miller insisted was essential for developing complete familiarity with the weapon. "A competition pistol should be an extension of your arm," he reminded me. "You should feel any deviation, any imperfection in its operation." The physical aspects of training were challenging. My arms and shoulders ached from holding the proper stance for extended periods. My eyes strained to focus on distant targets, but more difficult was retraining my mind. learning again to achieve the perfect stillness of thought that precedes an excellent shot. Your body is not the problem, Coach Miller observed during our 5th session. Your mind is still cluttered. You are thinking about too many things. Your financial troubles, those men who mocked you, your late husband. To shoot at championship level, you must empty your mind of everything except the perfect alignment between eye, sight, and target. He was right, of course. My concentration had once been legendary. As a young competitor, I could maintain focus through any distraction, crowd noise, weather changes, equipment failures. That mental discipline had atrophied over the decades, replaced by the divided attention of a woman managing a home, family, and later grief. On the 7th day of training, as I practiced breath control exercises, Coach Miller broached the subject that had been hovering unspoken between us. "The entry deadline for the Apex Invitational is next week," he said, checking the alignment of my rear sight. "Even if you were ready technically, which you are not yet, there is still the matter of the entry fee." I lowered my pistol, the weight of reality settling on my shoulders. I know. I have accepted that this training might be for nothing more than personal satisfaction. Coach Miller made a non-committal sound and continued adjusting my sight. There might be another way. The original founder of Oak Ridge Range was Jack Henderson. He retired to Florida years ago, but we still exchange holiday cards. He owned the property before selling to the tech billionaires. I remember Jack Henderson, a gruff but fair man who had supported local shooting sports for decades. What does that have to do with the entry fee? The sale contract included a clause that Henderson insisted upon, something about preserving community access. I never saw the details, but Jack mentioned a legacy competitor provision that allowed former champions to enter competitions at the facility regardless of current membership status. Hope flared briefly before common sense tamped it down. Even if such a provision exists, those men running the place now would find a way around it. Coach Miller smiled thinly. Perhaps. Or perhaps they never bothered to read the fine print of the acquisition documents. Rich men often delegate such details to their lawyers. That evening, Coach Miller made a phone call to Florida while I continued practicing dry fire exercises to improve my trigger control. I could hear only his side of the conversation, brief questions followed by longer periods of listening. When he returned, his expression was guardedly optimistic. "Henderson is contacting the Apex management directly. He believes the legacy competitor provision is legally binding. We should know tomorrow." The next morning, I awoke to an email notification on my phone. The message was brief and formal, from the Apex Precision Club. "Dear Ms. Jensen, following review of your competitive history and consultation with the former proprietor of Oak Ridge Range, we are pleased to extend an invitation to participate in the upcoming Apex Invitational under the Legacy Competitor designation. Please find attached the necessary documentation and liability waivers. Note that while the entry fee is waived, all competitors are subject to the same rules and standards of conduct. Registration must be completed in person, no later than Friday." My hands trembled as I read the message again. I forwarded it to Coach Miller with a simple message. It worked. His reply came minutes later. "Registration is tomorrow, 10 a.m. Wear your old competition jacket." The following day, I parked my Honda in the visitor section of the Apex lot, feeling conspicuously out of place among the luxury vehicles. I had found my old competition jacket in the attic, the blue and gold colors of my former club still vibrant despite the decades in storage. It fit more snugly than it once had, but I wore it proudly as I entered the facility. The atmosphere chilled noticeably as I approached the registration desk. The receptionist recognized me from my previous visit, her professional smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "I am here to register for the Apex Invitational," I said, placing my invitation email on the counter. "Legacy competitor designation." She examined the email with poorly disguised surprise before tapping at her computer. "Yes, Ms. Jensen, we have you in the system. If you will just complete these forms and provide proof of identity, we can proceed with your registration." As I filled out the paperwork, I became aware of a presence behind me. Turning, I found myself face to face with Maxwell Price, the silver-haired man who had dismissed me so thoroughly during my previous visit. "Ms. Jensen," he said, his tone falsely cordial. "What an unexpected development. I was not aware we had extended an invitation to legacy competitors." "It was quite a surprise to me as well," I replied evenly, holding his gaze. His smile did not reach his eyes. "I admire persistence, even when misguided. Perhaps we could find you a position cleaning our equipment after the competition." Before I could respond, another voice interjected. "Maxwell, is this how Apex welcomes distinguished former champions?" The woman who approached was in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in designer athletic wear. Her presence commanded immediate attention, and even Price seemed to defer slightly to her arrival. "Elaine Winters," she introduced herself, extending her hand to me. "CEO of Horizon Technologies and occasional competitor. I have been looking forward to meeting you since I saw your name on the registration list." Maxwell's expression soured. "You know of Ms. Jensen." Elaine's smile was coolly professional. "Anyone who has bothered to research the history of precision shooting in this state knows of Sarah Jensen. 3 state championships and an Olympic qualifying score that stood as a record for nearly a decade." I shook her hand, grateful for the unexpected support. "That was a long time ago, Ms. Winters." "Elaine, please," she corrected. "And talent does not simply disappear, Sarah. It merely waits for the right moment to re-emerge." She turned to Maxwell. "The safety briefing is beginning, shall we?" As we walked toward the briefing room, Elaine spoke quietly. "They mocked me too when I showed up at my first board meeting. Nothing satisfies quite like proving them wrong." I took my seat in the briefing room, aware of the curious and often dismissive glances from the other competitors. Most were men in their 30s and 40s, attired in expensive shooting gear adorned with sponsor logos. I was by far the oldest participant and the only one whose equipment did not gleam with newness. Maxwell Price stood at the front of the room, welcoming the competitors with practiced charm, outlining the competition format and prize structure. His gaze passed over me as if I were invisible, a tactical slight that did not go unnoticed by the others. As I listened to the technical details of the competition, the magnitude of what I had undertaken began to sink in. These were serious competitors with state-of-the-art equipment and regular practice schedules. Many had coaches and sponsors standing by. I had an old pistol, a retired coach, and a determination born of desperation and wounded pride. The odds were overwhelming, but as I looked around the room at the confident, entitled faces of my competitors, I remembered Coach Miller's words. "Shooting is not about equipment or youth or strength. It is about patience, discipline, and the perfect stillness of mind in the moment of truth." I straightened in my seat. The threshold had been crossed. There was no turning back now. The Apex Invitational was structured as a 3-day event. The first day featured preliminary rounds to eliminate the less skilled competitors. The second day would narrow the field to 8 semifinalists. The final day would determine the champion through a series of increasingly difficult precision challenges. I arrived for the preliminary round an hour early, following Coach Miller's instructions to familiarize myself with the facility and conditions. The competition area was impressive: climate-controlled shooting bays with electronic target systems, and digital scoring displays visible to both competitors and spectators. Remember, Coach Miller had advised during our final training session, the electronic targets will feel different from the paper ones we have been using. Do not let the technology distract you. Focus on your fundamentals. The preliminary round consisted of 4 series of 10 shots each at a standard distance of 25 meters. As I waited for my assigned time slot, I observed the other competitors. Their routines were practiced and efficient, their equipment meticulously maintained. Many had support teams helping them prepare, adjusting sights and offering last-minute advice. I stood alone at the preparation table, methodically checking my pistol and ammunition. The Walther felt reassuring in my hands, its familiar weight and balance a connection to the younger woman who had once dominated competitions with this very weapon. Competitor Jensen, Bay 3, called the range officer. I moved to my assigned position, aware of the skeptical glances from both officials and spectators. The electronic display showed my name and competitor number, alongside a blank space where my score would soon appear. The first series was challenging. My hands trembled slightly, and my breathing rhythm was disrupted by the unfamiliar environment. My shots were adequate but not exceptional, placing me in the middle of the pack rather than near the top where I needed to be.